and showed us the way to come up through the hatch. And we walked out hand by hand and out to the bow.
The crew fought on, but by 10 a.m., the Franklin lay dead in the water. Her head falling off to starboard in a 13-degree list, engines gone, water mains ruptured, no communications but 2 short lines of sound-powered phone. And she had drifted to within 52 miles of Japan.
Well, I was later asked why I did not abandon the ship. I knew that if we abandoned the ship, the next thing would happen were the destroyers with us would be ordered to sock her with torpedoes and sink her. And there was always in my mind what happened, was reported to have happened on the Yorktown, that there were some men down below, trapped in compartments way down the ship, when they hit her with the torpedoes to sink her. And I knew I had a great number of men down below in the spaces below. We hadn't been able to get out yet. And I was just not about to let all those men go down with the ship.
On the third deck, 300 men were jammed shoulder to shoulder in the crew's mess. Rion Hillegas, seaman second class, was one of the first to seek refuge in what was soon to become a smoke-filled trap.
When the ship was hit, I was coming out of the galley with two gallons of coffee. Of course, like everybody else, I hit the deck. And I dropped a gallon of coffee over the fellows in the galley and a gallon of coffee over the fellows in the passageway. Everybody kept their head right to the deck. Then after maybe a half a minute, we began to get up off of the deck, and I just felt like we were really trapped. And at the time, I was mess cooking, so I was very familiar with this compartment here. And I knew that it was the one compartment that we could seal off, and it was the one compartment that we could possibly get some air in. But this right here was our only source of air while we were in here. I would say within 10 minutes, the compartment was pretty well filled up. While sitting here, I couldn't help but remember that although it was March the 19th out here, that back home in Norfolk, it was March the 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day. And I knew that my mother and father had been out for their usual St. Patrick's Day party with the Flahertys and the Sullivans and the McConaugheys, and I knew that at this hour, on that day back in Norfolk, that they were probably feeling the effects of the party the night before. But they just would never know what a horrible predicament I was in here this morning.
Hour after hour, major explosions tore the ship and lifted it in the water. Men wounded and burned were snatched from the fires and helped to an emergency aid station, where Weldon Gatlin, the Protestant chaplain, took charge. Father Joseph O'Callahan, the Catholic chaplain, walked the tilted deck to give the last rites.
Father O'Callahan was very popular in the ship, and everyone knew him, and he seemed to know everybody. And on this day, if I first noticed him, I could identify him down around the deck because he had a big white cross painted on the front of his helmet. And we had a dressing station up forward there where they were gathering wounded, and he was up there assisting with that. And then I would see him come back down the middle of the deck here, and men would be being brought out, and there'd be a big explosion, and they'd run back. And then they would kind of cluster around the chaplain, and they'd walk right back in with him. They seemed to think he had a charmed life, and I began to think so, too.
It was still another extraordinary act that brought Father O'Callahan the first Medal of Honor awarded a Navy chaplain. Just forward of the bridge, heat, fumes, and smoke rose suddenly from a 5-inch gun turret, threatening to blow up the whole island and the ship's command. At once, Father O'Callahan quickly rounded up a work party to take a hose into the turret and climbed right in with him to help pass out the shells and drop them over the side.
I remember saying to somebody, "That's about the bravest man I've ever seen." This was so clearly above and beyond the call of duty, and at the risk of his life, and without detriment to his mission, and certainly in the face of the enemy, he fulfilled every requirement, every criteria for the Congressional Medal of Honor.
The Navy was his first parish. Until then, he had been a teaching priest. It was on his name day, Feast of St. Joseph, that the scholar became a man of action. The same day, 19 years later, he would die. Remembered with love by Yeoman Third Class Robert Blanchard for what happened on this exact spot.
I came up to the flight deck after being trapped below for some time. And when I came up to the flight deck, I was in a semi-conscious state because of the smoke, and my throat was burning. And the next minute I knew, I saw Father O'Callahan bending over me, giving me the last rites and the sign of the cross. I figured this was it, this was the end, and I kept thinking about all the time I was there during the day praying that I could get home to my wife and daughter and raise a family. And I thank God that I was able to do so.
9 a.m., 2 hours after the bombs hit. Down below, among the men the captain had resolved to rescue, 300 were now facing death by suffocation. George Shapiro, five-letter college athlete, was serving at age 44 as an electrician's mate second class, the oldest enlisted man on board, inevitably called Pop by his teenage shipmates.
I remember very distinctly our medical officer, Dr. Fueling, telling us not to get excited. He told us that if you wish to, you can pray to the Almighty God. I'll never forget that incident.
He also said, if you pray, don't pray out loud. Pray to yourself, so we could conserve the air that was in here.
After waiting about 2 hours to be saved, and assuming it was practically hopeless, I saw an officer come in, and it was Commander Gary. This guy is the guy who really saved us.